What if I told you that Carl Jung discovered there's a specific form of detachment that can free you from years of emotional suffering, and that this form is directly connected to your personality type? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who revolutionized our understanding of the human psyche, made a groundbreaking discovery about how different personality types can achieve psychological freedom through completely different approaches to detachment. Before we dive into this life-changing journey of self-discovery, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. These Jung insights about detachment could literally transform how you experience emotional pain and psychological freedom, and you won't want to miss any revelation that could change your entire relationship with suffering. Jung spent decades studying the deepest patterns of human consciousness and discovered something that shocked even him. He realized that most people's attempts at detachment fail because they're trying to detach in ways that go against their fundamental psychological structure. He found that true detachment isn't about becoming emotionally numb or spiritually bypassing your feelings. It's about understanding how your specific type of mind naturally processes attachment, and then using that understanding to achieve genuine psychological freedom. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to effortlessly let go of things that would torment others for months or years? How some individuals can experience devastating losses and somehow maintain their inner peace, while others get completely consumed by relatively minor disappointments? Jung discovered this isn't because some people are naturally more enlightened or spiritually advanced. It's because different psychological types have completely different pathways to detachment. The INFJ, INFP, INTJ, and INTP types represent four of the most complex and fascinating approaches to detachment that Jung identified. These types share something profound. They're all introverted and intuitive, which means they live primarily in rich internal worlds where attachment and detachment play out on multiple levels simultaneously. But each type has a unique relationship with attachment that requires a completely different approach to achieving freedom. What makes Jung's discovery so revolutionary is that he realized detachment isn't about forcing yourself to care less or trying to become indifferent to outcomes. True detachment is about understanding the deeper psychological mechanisms that create suffering, and then working with your natural mental processes to transcend those mechanisms. Think about the things in your life that cause you the most emotional turbulence. Maybe it's your need for others to understand and appreciate you. Maybe it's your attachment to having your relationships work out in specific ways. Maybe it's your need to feel in control of outcomes, or your attachment to being right about your ideas and perspectives. Maybe it's your deep need for authenticity and meaning in everything you do. Now observe how your mind relates to these attachments. Do you create elaborate internal scenarios about how things should unfold? Do you find yourself emotionally invested in outcomes that are completely outside your control? Do you suffer when reality doesn't match your internal vision of how things should be? Do you get caught in cycles of analysis and worry about things that may never happen? Jung discovered that each psychological type gets attached in characteristic ways, and therefore each type needs to approach detachment through their natural strengths rather than fighting against their psychological nature. The problem is that most spiritual and psychological teachings about detachment are one-size-fits-all approaches that work for some types but create more suffering for others. Let's begin by exploring the profound and complex world of INFJ detachment. If you're an INFJ, your relationship with attachment is unlike any other type. Your mind works like a visionary architect, constantly creating detailed internal blueprints of how relationships, situations, and life itself should unfold. When you become attached to something, you're not just attached to the surface reality, you're attached to the entire web of meaning and possibility that you've constructed around that thing. Jung identified that INFJs possess dominant introverted intuition combined with auxiliary extroverted feeling. This creates a unique psychological dynamic where you're simultaneously seeing the deepest potential in every person and situation while also being deeply invested in the emotional outcomes of those potentials being realized. When you care about someone or something, you don't just care about what is, you care about what could be. This is why detachment is so challenging for INFJs. You're not just trying to detach from current reality, you're trying to detach from entire universes of possibility that exist in your mind. When a relationship doesn't work out the way you envisioned, you're not just losing that person, you're losing all the beautiful potential futures you saw for that connection. When a project or goal doesn't manifest as you hoped, you're not just experiencing disappointment, you're grieving the death of a vision that felt absolutely real to you. Your mind creates what Jung called archetypal attachments. You don't just see people as they are, you see them as representations of deeper patterns and possibilities. You might see someone as the embodiment of your ideal partner, your perfect creative collaborator, or your spiritual twin. When these archetypal projections don't match reality, the disappointment can be devastating because it feels like losing something sacred. But here's what Jung discovered about the INFJ path to detachment. Your greatest strength is also your key to freedom. Your ability to see beyond surface reality and perceive deeper patterns can be redirected from creating attachments to creating understanding. Instead of using your visionary gifts to build elaborate expectations about how things should be, you can use them to understand the deeper spiritual principles that govern all manifestation. The secret for INFJs is learning what Jung called archetypal detachment. This means recognizing that the beautiful potentials you see in people and situations are real, but they exist in the realm of possibility, not necessarily in current reality. When you can appreciate the beauty of potential without needing it to manifest in specific ways, you achieve a form of detachment that actually enhances your visionary gifts rather than diminishing them. True detachment for INFJs involves shifting from being attached to specific outcomes to being attached to the process of growth and evolution itself. When you can see every experience, whether pleasant or painful, as part of a larger pattern of spiritual development, you maintain your deep caring while releasing your need to control how that caring manifests in the world. Now let's explore the unique and beautiful challenge of INFP detachment. If you're an INFP, your relationship with attachment is deeply personal and intensely emotional. Your mind works like a master artist, painting vivid internal landscapes of feeling and meaning. When you become attached to something, you're not just attached to the external reality. You're attached to the entire emotional symphony that plays in your inner world around that attachment. Jung identified that INFPs possess dominant introverted feeling, which creates an incredibly rich and complex internal emotional ecosystem. When you care about something, that caring becomes woven into the very fabric of your identity. Your attachments aren't just preferences or desires, they become part of who you are at the deepest level. This creates a unique challenge for INFPs when it comes to detachment. You're not just trying to let go of external things, you're trying to let go of parts of yourself. When you're attached to a person, that person becomes integrated into your sense of self. When you're attached to a dream or goal, that dream becomes part of your identity. Letting go can feel like losing pieces of your soul. Your emotional attachments are also incredibly nuanced and complex. You don't just love someone, you love them in 17 different ways simultaneously. You don't just want something to happen, you want it to happen in a way that honors all your deepest values and creates maximum beauty and meaning. This emotional complexity makes detachment feel almost impossible because there are so many layers of attachment to work through. But Jung discovered something beautiful about the INFP path to detachment. Your deep emotional nature isn't an obstacle to freedom. It's actually your pathway to the most profound form of detachment possible. Your ability to feel deeply and love unconditionally can be transformed from a source of attachment into a source of liberation. The key for INFPs is what Jung called emotional transcendence. This doesn't mean feeling less or caring less. It means learning to love so purely and completely that your love becomes independent of outcomes. When you can love someone without needing them to love you back in specific ways, when you can pursue your dreams without needing them to unfold exactly as you imagine, you achieve a form of detachment that actually deepens your capacity for love rather than diminishing it. This process requires INFPs to develop what Jung called emotional sovereignty. You learn to own your feelings completely without making other people or external circumstances responsible for your emotional state. You can feel deeply disappointed without making the person who disappointed you responsible for fixing your disappointment. You can feel profound love without making the object of your love responsible for reciprocating in specific ways. The breakthrough for INFPs comes when you realize that true love and true detachment are actually the same thing. When you love something so completely that you want what's best for it regardless of how that affects you, you've achieved the highest form of both attachment and detachment simultaneously. You're completely connected to what you love, but completely free from needing to control it. This understanding transforms your emotional nature from a source of suffering into a source of wisdom. Your deep feelings become a compass that guides you toward what's truly important, while your detachment allows you to navigate life's inevitable changes and disappointments with grace and resilience. Now let's explore the fascinating world of INTJ detachment. If you're an INTJ, your relationship with attachment is strategic and systematic. Your mind works like a master architect, constantly building and refining internal models of how reality should be structured for optimal outcomes. When you become attached to something, you're not just attached to the thing itself, you're attached to the entire strategic framework you've built around achieving or maintaining that thing. Jung identified that INTJs possess dominant introverted intuition combined with auxiliary extroverted thinking. This creates a unique psychological dynamic where you're simultaneously seeing the long-term patterns and possibilities in every situation, while also organizing and systematizing your approach to manifesting those possibilities. Your attachments are rarely emotional in the traditional sense. They're more like strategic investments in specific outcomes. This is why detachment can be particularly challenging for INTJs. You're not just trying to let go of desires or preferences, you're trying to let go of carefully constructed plans and systems that you've invested significant mental energy in developing. When something doesn't work out as you planned, you're not just experiencing disappointment, you're experiencing the collapse of an entire strategic framework. Your mind naturally wants to control variables and optimize outcomes. You become attached to having things work according to your vision, not because you're emotionally needy, but because your vision is usually genuinely better than the alternatives you see around you. You can see inefficiencies and missed opportunities that others miss, and it can be frustrating when reality doesn't align with your superior strategic understanding. But Jung discovered something profound about the INTJ path to detachment. Your strategic mind, which seems like it would make detachment more difficult, is actually your greatest tool for achieving it. The key is learning to apply your strategic thinking to the problem of attachment itself. The secret for INTJs is what Jung called meta-strategic detachment. This means using your strategic abilities to develop strategies for detachment. You can analyze the costs and benefits of different types of attachment, identify the most efficient approaches to letting go, and create systematic methods for maintaining psychological freedom. When you approach detachment strategically, it stops being an emotional struggle and becomes an intellectual challenge. You can ask questions like, what are the actual benefits of being attached to this outcome? What are the costs of holding on to this attachment? What would be the most efficient way to achieve my goals while remaining detached from specific outcomes? This approach allows you to maintain your natural drive for excellence and achievement, while releasing your need to control exactly how that excellence manifests. You can work toward your vision with full commitment while remaining flexible about the specific path that vision takes to become reality. The breakthrough for INTJs often comes when you realize that detachment actually makes you more effective, not less. When you're not attached to specific outcomes, you can adapt more quickly to changing circumstances, see opportunities that attachment would blind you to, and make decisions based on current reality rather than past plans. Finally, let's explore the unique and fascinating world of INTP detachment. If you're an INTP, your relationship with attachment is philosophical and conceptual. Your mind works like a brilliant scientist, constantly developing and testing theories about how reality works. When you become attached to something, you're usually attached to the ideas and principles underlying that thing, rather than the thing itself. Jung identified that INTPs possess dominant introverted thinking, which creates a unique relationship with attachment. You're rarely attached to external outcomes in the way other types are. Instead, you become attached to your understanding of how things should work, your theories about reality, and your need for logical consistency in your worldview. This creates an interesting paradox for INTPs. On one hand, you're naturally detached from many things that other types struggle to let go of. You don't usually get emotionally invested in relationships, career outcomes, or material possessions in the same way others do. But on the other hand, you can become incredibly attached to your ideas, your need to understand things completely, and your desire for intellectual consistency. Your attachments are primarily mental rather than emotional. You might become attached to a particular theory about how relationships work, or a specific understanding of what constitutes truth, or a need to have all your beliefs fit together in a perfectly logical system. When reality challenges these mental attachments, you can experience a form of suffering that's just as intense as emotional attachment, but much more subtle and harder to identify. Jung discovered that the INTP path to detachment involves what he called intellectual humility. This doesn't mean thinking less of your intellectual abilities, which are usually quite impressive. It means recognizing that your understanding of reality, no matter how sophisticated, is always incomplete and subject to revision. The key for INTPs is learning to hold your ideas and theories lightly. You can be deeply committed to the pursuit of truth and understanding while remaining detached from any particular version of truth that you currently hold. This allows you to update your understanding when new information becomes available, without experiencing the kind of cognitive dissonance that comes from being too attached to specific beliefs. This approach transforms your natural curiosity and love of learning from potential sources of attachment into tools for detachment. When you're genuinely curious about how things work, you're naturally open to having your current understanding challenged and refined. When you're attached to being right about how things work, you become closed to new information that might contradict your current beliefs. The breakthrough for INTPs often comes when you realize that the pursuit of understanding is more important than any particular understanding you currently hold. When you can love the process of learning more than any specific thing you've learned, you achieve a form of detachment that actually enhances your intellectual abilities rather than limiting them. Here's what Jung understood about detachment that most spiritual and psychological teachings miss. True detachment isn't about caring less or becoming emotionally numb. It's about understanding the deeper psychological mechanisms that create suffering and then working with your natural mental processes to transcend those mechanisms. For INFJs, detachment means shifting from attachment to specific outcomes to attachment to the process of growth itself. For INFPs, it means learning to love so purely that your love becomes independent of outcomes. For INTJs, it means applying your strategic thinking to the problem of attachment itself. For INTPs, it means holding your ideas and theories lightly while remaining committed to the pursuit of truth. But here's the deeper secret Jung discovered. Regardless of your type, true detachment ultimately leads to greater engagement with life, not less. When you're not constantly worried about protecting your attachments, you can respond to life more spontaneously and authentically. When you're not afraid of losing what you care about, you can love more deeply and completely. The most powerful thing you can do right now is identify your psychological type and start experimenting with the detachment approach that aligns with your natural mental processes. Stop trying to detach the way spiritual teachers tell you to detach. Start developing detachment in the way that makes sense for how your mind actually works. Detachment isn't about becoming indifferent to life. It's about becoming so secure in your own psychological freedom that you can engage with life fully without being controlled by your need for specific outcomes. Jung showed us that this kind of freedom is possible for everyone, but the path to that freedom looks different for each psychological type. What attachments are you ready to examine with this new understanding? What would change in your life if you could maintain your deep caring while releasing your need to control outcomes? The answers to these questions might surprise you, and they definitely have the power to transform your entire relationship with suffering and freedom.